What's going on, friends? Throughout the years, Harley-Davidson has produced a lot of really trick and innovative models. Well, for Harley-Davidson. But the problem is that they just didn't sell that well. And one Dyna in particular was a really trick, really neat idea. The only problem with that Dyna is that it just basically became the Dyna that nobody wanted. And that's really sad because this bike had a lot going for it. The Dyna Switchback was really kind of the deal of the century at Harley-Davidson during that time frame. The Dyna Switchback, this thing had hard bags, it had a windshield, it had the twin cam 103, the high output version at that, and the bike ran from 2012 to 2016 and basically died with the Dyna line. Now, probably the main thing that was going against the Dyna Switchback was most Dyna buyers. The last thing that they were really interested in was a touring motorcycle, and that is essentially what the Dyna Switchback was. But the Dyna Switchback had a few tricks up its sleeve. Guys, please don't forget, if you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. Now, despite most Dynas really being used for more performance and just cruising applications, the Dyna Switchback was kind of the best of both worlds. This bike was a touring bike, but it also had quick detachable hard bags and a quick detachable windshield right from the factory. So you could switch back between cruising and touring pretty quickly and easily. Now, one of the other great features about the Dyna Switchback was that this thing was so easy to customize. This thing didn't have bar risers, and it also had your gauges mounted on the tank. In fact, the tank, everything about it screamed touring bike. But with no riser on the bars, it was pretty much unrestricted access to get in there and change your bars out. You didn't have to stick with kind of those swanny looking bars that came stock. You could put some Z bars on it. You could put T bars on it. The Dyna Switchback was so easy to make it anything you wanted. And a lot of guys, sometimes they even took it a step further. They would ditch the windshield on these things. They'd go out and buy a batwing fairing and mount it on there, and even put a stereo in it if you wanted to. This was super easy to do on this bike. And when you did that, a lot of people, if they didn't really know what they were looking at, they would think it's a street glide. It was so easy to make it look like a street glide. It was like the little baby Road King or baby street glide. Not only that, you didn't have to deal with the weight when it came to the touring bike. The Dyna Switchback could easily become a baby street glide, or it was already looked like a baby Road King, but it weighed 100 pounds less. And some guys even took it a step further. It had a 2-in-1 exhaust from the factory, but you could get aftermarket exhaust that allow you to add a second muffler underneath the left side bag. And when you did that, walking by this thing, if you didn't know what you were looking at, you would think it's either a Road King, or if it had the fairing on it, you'd mistake it for a street glide pretty easily at first glance. I know I did many times on these bikes when they were all decked out. Now let's talk price. This bike, not only being 100 pounds lighter than the Street Glide and the Road King, this thing was also significantly less. We're talking about $6,000 less than a Street Glide Special. And not only that, it was about $1,500 less than the Road King. And if you were thinking if you're just going to get a regular Street Glide, you're still looking at about $3,500 difference. So I want to say this was kind of the poor man's new touring bike in the Harley-Davidson lineup. You think about those savings, if you went out and bought one of these brand new, $6,000 would go a long way into making a really nice motorcycle out of that Dyna platform. The biggest problem for the Dyna Switchback is a lot of Dyna buyers, the last thing that they were thinking about by looking at that was touring. The Dyna frame is actually a really good platform to build on, and this Dyna Switchback had the long travel suspension. It really did handle and ride pretty dang well. Now, honestly, my opinion, it was not quite the touring bike as far as the ride, but I thought it handled a lot better, and it ran pretty dang good down the road. It was also the rubber-mounted engine, just like the touring bikes, so it shared a lot in common with them, although in the Dyna platform, it did tend to vibrate a lot more when you were at a stop, but once you got rolling, it was just as smooth going down the road, just like your touring bike. It was also a great option, not only if you were trying to save a little money, but also if you didn't want to deal with that extra weight that came with a Street Glide or Road King. But make no mistake, even on the Dyna platform, Harley-Davidson took care to put a nice, big, wide, comfortable seat on it for you and the passenger. These bikes were still pretty roomy, even when you compare them to the touring bikes. Not only that, The ground clearance on them was pretty decent, and the seat height, it wasn't really too bad. To me, they set up a little bit higher than the touring bikes, but also they were quite a bit narrower too. So if you're on the shorter side, you're able to put your feet on the ground a lot flatter than you would be able to on some of the touring bikes. Even though the touring bike seat height's a little lower, the seats are a little wider. And like for me personally, the touring bikes are a little uncomfortable with how wide they are. Having a twin cam 103 HO bone stock and also weighing 100 pounds less, like I mentioned, you're in that Dyna frame platform, so you have that weight savings, but it also allows you to take advantage of the power of the engine. Even if it's mildly modified, you're going to get a little bit more oomph out of that motor just by the reduced weight. The Dyna Switchback really is a nice, healthy option that already comes, even used. Hopefully they still have the bags in the windshield. I see a lot of them used where the bags in the windshield have disappeared somewhere along the line. But you can get really lucky and find one of these that still has its bags, maybe even has a batwing fairing that somebody's installed a stereo on, maybe even went as far as to put the dual exhaust system set up on it. I kid you not, these things look just like a Street Glide. You can park them side by side, and it takes a real keen eye at first glance to notice that, hey, that's not an actual touring bike. That's a Dyna in disguise. But guys, I absolutely loved the Dyna Switchback for its versatility. You can, like I mentioned, you can pull the bags, you can pull the windshield, have it down to a stripped down cruiser, and all this stuff was quick detachable items. These are some expensive parts from Harley-Davidson that came factory on these bikes. Now, even used, the Dyna Switchbacks, they are kind of hard to find, and the other downside to them is that they really didn't come in a lot of colors. Just basically a black, a blue, a pearl color, and a green. Nothing too wild. You couldn't get any fancy flake colors like you could on some of the Road Kings, and definitely on the Street Glides and the Street Glide Specials. But definitely, if you're in the market for a touring bike and you just can't quite pop for a Road King or a Street Glide Special, or even just a regular old Street Glide, Dyna Switchback is a great option. You get a lot of the features of the touring bikes, and also, I mean, you might have to add a little bit of your own touch to it, whether you want to put a fairing on it, put a stereo in it, but it's all there. It's easy to do, and a lot of companies, aftermarket out there, they make things directly for these bikes that are centered around making them look just like the touring bike. And not only that, exponentially lighter, more power, and they cost a heck of a lot less than going out buying a used Road King or a Street Glide. You might be able to get an older Street Glide or an older Road King cheaper, but it may have more miles on it. When you look at buying a used Dyna Switchback, if you can find one, they're kind of hard to find, but they usually go for less, and they have less miles, and you're still rocking that twin cam 103 high output, which is an excellent motor. Put some cams in it, put some good exhaust on it if it doesn't have it already, and you're good to go. But guys, if you own a Dyna Switchback, or if you've owned one, I want to know your opinion on this bike. Let me know in the comments what you think. I absolutely love them. I think it was one of the greatest models that Harley-Davidson put out in the Dyna line, just because of its versatility. But I want to know your opinions. Let me know down in the comments. But anyhow, guys, that's all I've got for you this week. If you guys enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button, and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. But guys, until next week, you stay safe on the streets, ride smart, dodge those cars, and I'll catch you guys back here next week with a brand new video. Thanks for watching.